Todd Hines, epic Marx train videos. The Minneapolis Northern lives again. Those Marx trains are heading down the line. See them cross the bridge and rounding the bend. See them cross the bridge and rounding the bend.
Greetings and welcome to this epic Marx train video. We got a treat for you today. I interviewed Bill Felege. He was a designer at Marx Toys. He designed some toys, some packaging. He even designed some of our trains. And some of the information he gives would be very interesting, including some information on their sound of power tender. Now my audio did not turn out, so I put in my questions as captions within the video. I hope you enjoy.
Sure. We're glad to be with you, Todd, this afternoon, I should say. Yes, I joined the Marx toy industry in 1969 at the Girard Manufacturing Company's R&D department. I was hired as an artist, toy designer, and I started my work there in the late 1969, and I worked until 1972. Within that time, from about 5.5 years approximately, I designed toys, mostly trains. I was involved with several reproduction of toys that were already, they were the older models, and I updated them with new artwork on the boxes themselves. And I'm going to just say the train lines, I redid the big rail box, was one of the biggest ones, first ones I did. I redid the artwork on that, and actually it's my nephews laying on the floor playing with the big rail with the chug chug sound. But that was just the start of many. From production boxes, I adjusted all of them to include the Marx, we call the Marx stripe, and eventually Great American Railroads came along. We went through a pretty good year or so in the 70s there, as the Marx organization was purchased by Quaker Oats, and the Quaker Oats folks came along and really wanted to do more sales of the train line itself. So then they put me to work searching and actually making samples of new colored, brighter colors on the trains, different stamps, rubber stamps for the train identification, let's say on gondolas and cabooses and that kind of decoration. Also the change up to select different train line colors to go together, because we were also working with the Marx organization was working with a company, an advertising company in New York City, to make up new boxes, new boxes, I should say. They just asked me to furnish them with the new bright colors, new stamps for those items to be shown on the artwork on the box itself. So I was pretty active doing that. Along with that, I was also given tasks to update the graphics on what they call the electroshot box. That's where the little gun is encased and there's little pellets that shoot it. And that was, I did a couple, that one, and I did several others that updated them. Going back to the trains, though, I redid modifications for several cartons. I did what they call a see-through package, where there's a couple windows on the box itself. You can see the train inside it. Had to do those basically all by hand. I really, this was a learning curve for me, how to build a corrugated box from scratch with perforation tools and cutting the dimensions and making sure it fit before they went into production. Also, I was involved with having to help with a model maker who we cut the styrofoam internal packaging. They call this dunnage, but it's actually the foam packaging inside that the cars and the transformer tracks are all held in. So I did some of those. So it was really hard to tell what I was going to be doing. Then I was given the task to redo a basketball game. Marx had actually gotten the rights to for NBA logo use. So we have different logos on it, but it was a revision of a toy that had been around quite a while from the 1950s. And it was called Set Shot, I believe. And from there, I did all the graphics on that. It had to have all new graphics done. It was all lithographed. It was done down in Glendale, West Virginia. The printing was, and then shipped back up to us where we formed the Set Shot basketball game. So it's just, we did a myriad of different updates to things. One update I did do for a customer was the Crooks. They call it the Crooks. It's the old time steam locomotive. I did pull the front trucks off that. We took pictures of it and how it looked, and that the customer liked it, so we sold it that way. It looks like it needs something on the front end of it, like it lost its dentures or something. But that's how that came about. Then from there, I stayed there about 5.5 years. I worked on the Johnny Carson show display right at the end of my employment. I was then hired as a separate contractor to finish it. I was in charge of the graphics on the display. There was a team of us. There were two model makers from the Erie R&D and two from our R&D and myself. I was, like I said, I was the person who actually handled all the printing of the cars, the rubber stamp work that was done on them, make sure the cars looked pristine when they went onto the display. And the display was put together at Girard's R&D to make sure it functioned correctly. It was boxed up there, and then two of our model makers drove it to New York City. And then it was flown out to California to Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. And it went pretty well until Johnny hit the throttle and run the train off the track first thing. I'm like, oh man, all that work. But anyway, it worked. Okay. Then well, the layout itself was like done in two pieces. One at the Girard facility, with our people handled most of the engineering on it as far as the track layout and the performance of the display itself. Meanwhile, the other half was done at the Erie R&D. They built part of the, I'm trying to recall, part of the mountain set was done, and it came in on two pieces of plywood. And we put it together with our piece and their piece, and it functioned. So we proofed it out. The guys watched the performance of it. The cars looked great. My rubber stamp guy out on the assembly line, he made up like 6 samples of each car for me as he stamped the rubber stamp on it, and to make sure it was as pristine as we possibly could get it. And so that's how the car was selected for the set, for the display itself. Then after that, like I said, it was weird. There was some concern because that was when there was some gasoline shortage going on. If our guys would actually make it to New York City to the airport without running out of gas, but they did. They made it there in good shape, and it all went well. And I remember watching it on TV when it first came on, and they did a real nice job on it. It went together well, and everybody was pretty happy with it. I'm not exactly sure what happened to the display after that. I heard it went back to New York, to the New York office, and after that, I'm not sure exactly what happened to it. But it was a good little project to work on. Also, in my times at Marx, I also made samples for the trade show in New York City for the toy show. And also I did work for commercials that were done with the toys I worked on, like the Set Shot and some of the other ones. Commercials were made. I had to make samples for those and then ship them out to the various studios to do their filming of the commercials. So it's pretty busy person. When I started at the R&D at the Gerard Manufacturing Company, there were three of us. Eventually, by the 1971, I believe, there was only me, because one fella left for another job. Another guy, Dick Rastetter, he was actually went into the R&D in Erie to work as our head photographer. I worked with him on several of the boxes to have the new photos taken of the kids playing with the boxes, with the toys in the boxes, having new artwork put on them. After that, I went into the plastics industry. I went into the plastics injection molding industry for 10 years as a supervisor, and also as a technician. I also, in the meanwhile, I went back to college. I went back to Penn State Barron here, and I have a 2-year certificate in management, and I also took other courses as far as business math and that kind of inventory control. And as my career moved on, I went and joined another company, and I built a molding room from scratch. I was the molding manager to put in a 12 machine molding operation, and that consumed my life for about 10 years, various positions within that company, as a molding manager, and then as a production control manager for about 9 years. And then I moved along again. We were bought out by Owens, Illinois, and I moved along to another job in a company. As far as I worked basically in injection molding end of it as a technician, and eventually as some quality control at the end of my job career. And what it did is really inspired me when I worked for Marx Toys. Their engineers there were just some great people who said, hey, try and further your education if you can. And I did that exactly. They were a great group of guys to work with. There wasn't much they couldn't figure out. We did a lot of experimental things in the R&D unit at Marx Toys. So it was really quite a learning experience for me, but it changed my life and my job history. Yes, that was probably one of the nicest sets I put together while I was working for Marx. I was given the task to come up with a new work train system, and I says, well, let's try this. And I painted. I had samples painted and cards printed, and they wanted to put some snap into it too. They wanted to put more color into it as I could, and I went and did samples. New York office approved them all. They said, let's do this for a set to be produced and put out to the public. And looking at behind that, and now it looks just great. I still marvel at the color scheme and just the overall aesthetics of the set itself. It really looks nice. Looks like it's playable. We had a lot of fun with it. Yes, he is. He's my nephew. I called my sister-in-law up and said, "Hey, I need a kid in a hurry," and so she brought him into the Erie R&D where all the photographs were taken for the different toys, and she brought him in there, and that's who's laying on there. That's my nephew Mike. He's now 60 years old, so time has passed. Another unit that was. I had taken and designed. There was a hockey set that was made by Marx. I designed that. I was also given the official approval I signed the patent for it. And that was the first toy I was actually able to get my name onto the patent, but they approved it in New York office, and they said, well, you came up with the idea. We're making, I don't know how many they did make, but it was a small hockey table game. And that was really nice to do. To watch something be put together out on the assembly lines that you actually made the whole thing. there were the assembly lines. Just talking about trains, the assembly lines are there are approximately about maybe 30 to 35 women on the assembly. They'd start with the locomotives and put in each one of them into the box, into the styrofoam that I had designed. And not everything went well. Some of the fitting was tight, and they let me know about it. But at the end of the day, it all went together well. We didn't have any assembly problems out on the line. So I had a wide experience in being an artist toy designer. There was a lot of things that I did that they don't even prepare you. I graduated from the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, which was a fine school at the time, and I really did a lot of different things. But my forte was airbrush art, where we took apart mechanical things like valves and that, and illustrated them, touched up photographs. But nothing prepared me for what I was about to enter into with the Marx Toys. But it was really just a great experience. And the guys I worked with were all older than me. I was the youngest one hired into that R&D ever. All the rest of the guys were in their 50s and 60s, and I was noted as the kid because I was so young. I had just turned 20 when they hired me, so it was a good experience in my life. Sure. Well, Lionel had come out with a chug chug sound, and our New York office immediately tasked the Gerard R&D with making a revision to one of our tenders to actually make that soundboard put into, and also the pickup wheel on the bottom of it. And that's what was done by our electrical engineer, Noel Case, and Willie Rexford, one of our model makers, worked on the unit itself. And it was realistic. We tested the thing out, tested the soundboard and everything out on the car, and it worked just great. So we went into production with it, and that's when New York called up and said, "Hey, we want to make the big rail, brand new artwork, photograph, and all that good stuff." And they tasked me to get that done. And, we did several things at the Gerard R&D. We also troubleshot Marx typewriters. They were made overseas in Japan, but we were the repair station for them. One time I looked at a Japanese blueprint, and how they read those is beyond me. And everything was in metrics then too. It wasn't in English standard, and it was really a challenge to read a blueprint from them. But we did it. The guys did. I didn't do it, but my tool makers and my model makers did it. Yes, I did. When the chug chug sound and big rail was going to get done, they wanted to really spruce it up to make it more colorful, and make it look a lot better than just. And that one of the items they said, do something with that transformer. And I said, well, what do you want me to do with it? They said, well, give it a different color scheme, and also, if you can, that litho plate that's on the top. How about doing something with that? So we did. I painted up samples for them for that. It's like an aqua green, as I recall. And also then I worked on the plate, the ID plate that's on top, put on a wood grain as well as black printing on it, or black or white printing. I can't really remember, but that was updated also. You have to remember back then, all this, that printing that was done on that ID plate was all done by hand by one of our draftsmen. And he worked on that for me. Then we sent it down to Glendale. They did the lithographs and sent it back up to us, and we punched them out up here in Gerard and assembled it with the top of the case. So it all come out pretty good. It just changed the color. It wasn't just the old black thing. I don't know how long that had been on there, but it had been quite a while. It really made the transformer a lot more easy to look at. Yes, I did. I designed. I designed quite a few cars, but one of them I designed was that it was a wood slatted caboose, and I think there's just a number in the center of the caboose. But that was done again in conjunction with updating the one set, and I did that, and that really came out nice. After it came out, I said, "Boy, that really looks even realistic," you know. So they were happy with it at our New York office. When I sent samples up there almost constantly to them to get approval. I did some work initially. At one point in my career at Marx, I was sent into the Erie R&D to work there as a kind of to know what a designer does. And while I was working in there, I did some designs that Mr. Ray Lohr, who was the head of the R&D in Erie, asked me to do, and I drew these up. And he asked me, "Well, you know what a blow molding, how they do blow molding?" And I said, I had worked in injection before I went to art school. I had worked in an injection plant. And I said, "Yeah, well, I kind of know how that goes together." And he said, "Okay." So he gave me a couple ideas to draw up for him. He says, "I'm going to send these up to Mr. Marx and see what he thinks." So made the drawings and gave them to him. And he didn't say anything. He sent them up to Mr. Marx, and Mr. Marx said that, gee, he enjoyed them. He says, he says, "They look good." He says, "Well, then," he says, he sent them back down to me, and he says, "I'll tell you what," he says, "the only thing about this," he says, "I can't make them like you drew them." And I says, "Oh." He says, "Well," "I'll tell you what, I think you need to go down and take a look how molding or blow molding machine." So he had me set at the blow molding machine down there for 8 hours to watch how a blow molding unit works. And I watched monkey arms and wheels come out of these machines. So I know now how it works, but it was a learning curve for me. So anyway, he took it in pretty good stride. He didn't yell at me or anything. He just says, "I just can't make this the way you drew it." And so I learned how to draw that after that. But that was just one of the items. I worked with some skilled people in there, from the people who did their carving. It started out with just a block of wood and end up a dog or Winnie the Pooh or whatever Marx needed to make. So it was quite a good experience for me to learn that. And I was in there for like 2 months, and then I came back out to the R&D in Girard and worked there the rest of my time. But it was really a good learning experience being around with people who have God-given skills to do things. It just and creativity. Oh, yeah, I attended the Marx show and tell in York, Pennsylvania. That's the first time I had gone. I saw it by chance on the internet, and I decided to take a trip down, need to get some vacation time away. And it was really great to visit with the folks down there. There were approximately over 50 of us at the Marx show and tell. And every aspect of Marx was pretty much there. Everything from the press metal cars, both that were made here in the States as well as that were made overseas in England. There were different types of toys, wind-ups from back in the 30s and 40s. And obviously there were some trains there. But it was really a good time was had. And we talked about the historical part, along with the other folks that were there who were very knowledgeable about Marx historical items that were produced. So I had a really good time. I look forward to going again. When I just came to mind, I also a lot of things I did as far as the train accessories. I was tasked to do. They had never done a display that had the track curves and also a sidetrack unit that was put onto a. I want to describe it, but I can't. There was a large sheet. They vacuum formed those items right to it. Well, I had to make the artwork for. I never did that in my life. I had to make those. It was a blue unit, and I had to do the artwork so that it fit on there. X number of pieces would fit on one of these sheets. It was a perforated sheet, so when they put it in and laid the plastic on it and put the vacuum to it, it adhered right to the sheet itself and encased the tracks and the curves onto it. And it came out okay. It was a little tricky because you only have so many inches to work with, and it just fit on, let's say, the curves and that kind of item. But I did all the artwork on that also. And some of these things I did were, really just really a novelty type artwork and design to do. There were times I did get to go out onto the field here in Erie. Then was the General Electric plant, and they made obviously big locomotives. Well, when my guys from Erie would see them, they'd call me up so I could go take a picture of the train itself out in the yard that they had just finished production on, but it was just sitting there for a still shot. So I usually ran in there and took pictures of it. So we had pretty good access to different items. Looking back at the whole thing, when Marx was sold, there was a real push to get new toy items and updates to everything, and buy Quaker Oats. And the guy the head sales guy, he'd call me up on the phone and, hey, I need this sample. Can you get this done like right now? And I kind of put things off to the side and start working on what he needed and fly him up there for samples. So it was really a very busy time that I had. Every day was something new. It was just something you didn't know what you're going to be working on. So it was kind of cool. It was. Yes, they did. And the Marx actually had their legal staff ask me about, hey, which locomotive or which rail companies do you think we ought to, get a design from, the approval? And I think I'm just trying, I can't remember one right off the bat, but there were several that we got the permission from legally to use their logos on the trains. The Sioux Line was one of them. It was done on a yellow gondola. But that one in particular was an easy one to do because it had just big letters and just some smaller rubber stamp artwork. But that, oh, is it? Okay. Well, that was one of them that they got us the legal permission to use the insignia or the logo. Right as I was leaving, we did do a diesel electric unit, but it never made it to production. It was nice. It fit. It went around the curves good without wiping out everything because to make it to true 024, its tail went around and wiped out everything on the curve. But we got it down to where it really looked well, and I hand painted the Chessie logo system on there, the cat laying on the pillow. And it really came out nice. We did do some stuff for the centennial for America back then, and that I made samples, but there were a lot of things I made samples for, but didn't go into production. So we had really a fine experience working with some great people, very talented people. There wasn't much in the unit at Girard. They made all the gears and all the different spring assemblies and whatever needed to be made. They could make them right there by hand. They had the mathematics and the knowledge and the engineering to do it. But, that'll give you an idea what these were. There were like 13 of us in the R&D room to work on stuff, and it was really a fine experience. That's all I can say about that. Yes, it was. Some of my. It was odd because even some of my relatives actually worked out in the plant, and they were really surprised to see me come walking in one day and actually be a part of it, especially as knowing that I'd just gone to art school, and they said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm working in the R&D department. You can never show anybody what you're working on. I'd love that. Brought them in and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. Yeah, see that's But there were signs, stay out, keep out. Employees only, and they were really strict about that too. It wasn't so I couldn't show anybody what I was doing. Some of it will never be seen by anybody because it went up to the New York office and eventually was. I understand they were auctioned off at some point. Yeah, that's it was a sad time because you have to I think for everybody remembers the Marx company in Girard actually worked with the community. I mean, they when the fire whistle would blow, we'd have 3 or 4 of the guys come off the lines and go answer the fire and ambulance calls, and they paid them for it. There was no question why the guys were leaving the plant to go do a community job that really, for the that helped the community. So Marx was also we had a typical running year of production. Usually towards the fall, they start to lay off people. Well, a lot of the folks, not all of them, but a lot of them really enjoyed the layoff time because then they could go, especially the women. We hired a large amount of women, and they would stay, be laid off and stay at home for a while. In the spring, they'd rehire them to come back for the production lines. They revved them up. So it really had a big impact when they finally closed. It was kind of a sorry situation. Yes. It. So anyway, they had a really big impact on our community. I was sorry to see them go, but with everything, times were changing. There was just no call for that kind of activity as far as that toy trains. And so it really, and some of the other stuff they had brought out from the Erie plant to run it at the Girard plant again, it just once it was sold, it was really just a change, an overall change in management and management style. And to the positive, when they came in and bought the plant, they painted the whole inside. It hadn't been painted since World War II. I mean, they painted it all bright colors. They fixed windows and did a lot of, things inside the plant that really made it nice to work, a nice working condition. So instead of all of drab green everywhere, it was a light tan color, and then down below, about 4 feet off the ground, was a little darker. And it was really nice. And the windows were all cleaned off. Some of them were painted out. They replaced them all, and the light shined in, so you could actually see something out of the plant. It was pretty dingy at one point, but after it was purchased, it really kind of changed. So did the management. The management was adjusted also, and it was some aspects of it were good. I mean, but when you have any kind of change like that, it's usually there's some issues that have to be settled. But overall, everything went really well. For me, it really didn't make a large difference. One item, I had a little chime box that I had made labels for, and the model maker just finished it. And I gave it to the one guy to send up to the New York office, and he says, and then the supervisor came over, he said, don't send that. Just put it in the box. They just bought us. So it was really a competitive item against Fisher Price. And it went into a box. It never made it after all that work on it. But yeah, I was involved in like from 1969 on to about 74. And did a lot of the work on them on the revision. The Great American Railroads was done. The logo itself and the cars and whatever happened to that was all done up in the New York office. They were made, and the logos, because me personally, I didn't have time to do it. I was working And plus, I was going out the door. I told them I was leaving, and they were very nice to me. I can't say much more about that, but they said, "We hate to see you go." And my boss tried his best to possibly give me a raise, but at that time I think it was already in the wind. Something was going to change down there, and they just about a year later, they finally, I think, even closed up the R&D section of it. So it was sad to see you go, but anyway, that'll give you a quick overview of everything that I worked on. That's not everything, but the majority of it. It was anything. There was the just the R&D folks. We had if we needed something, we got it. The bottom line, or it was in our morgue. We had huge amount of materials out there, like semaphores and lighting towers and bubbling water towers, and all. We had them at our disposal if we needed them, let alone cars. And we had in our morgue itself, it was we had all sorts of train set samples from all over the world, from over Europe to the Far East, to take a look at if we wanted to. But it was really something to see the amount of toys that were held in our morgue. Appreciate it, Todd. Good talking to you, sir.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Epic Marx Trains. If you like this program, please hit the like button and leave a comment. And if you're not subscribed, please do so.
Todd Hines, Epic Marx Train videos. The Minneapolis Northern lives again. Those Marx trains are heading down the line. See them cross the bridge and rounding the bend. See them cross the bridge and rounding the bend.